Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is being hit by a lawsuit for his actions in sending migrants to Martha's Vineyard in what has been described as a political stunt. Now, the civil lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court of Massachusetts on Tuesday, just 6 days after 48 migrants were flown to the island on behalf of the governor. So now, let me address some of the right-wing framing around this situation that has unfortunately been picked up by even some mainstream outlets. For one, these are not undocumented immigrants. These are asylum seekers. They're not illegal. They're lawful asylum seekers. These are people who, again, followed the law, which says that you can apply for asylum inside the borders of the United States. So, again, no illegal border crossing here if you're seeking asylum. And now there's also the narrative that they went on these planes, they boarded these planes voluntarily. In reality, seems like they were lied to. And I'll show you evidence of that. Some of the Venezuelan migrants flown to Martha's Vineyard were actually given misleading brochures promising up to 8 months of cash assistance, employment services, and housing assistance, their lawyers tell Axios. So now, originally, images of this brochure were obtained by Judd Legum and posted in a story that he had published at Popular Info. I want to show you that right here. So, yeah, look at that. That's the brochure showing all the wonderful services that migrants and asylum seekers are actually not eligible for. Let me show you the other side of that. And you can see, there it is. Brochure says that migrants who arrive in Massachusetts will be eligible for numerous benefits, including, again, 8 months of cash assistance, assistance with housing, food, clothing, transportation to job interviews, job training, job placement, registering children for school, assistance for applying Social Security cards, and many other benefits that, again, they're actually not supposed to get. And according to some of the migrants, the benefits described in the brochure were also promised verbally to lure them onto the planes chartered by DeSantis. Quote, they told us that they were going to help us with the rent to get a job. That was the only option left to us, one migrant, Eduardo Linares, told the Texas Tribune. Linares, of course, ultimately declined to board the flight. As you can see, it was a lie. There was no support system. And when they showed up at Martha's Vineyard, it was a complete and utter surprise to everyone there, who then, of course, had to, struggle to set things up to accommodate these migrants. Ultimately, they did set up a support system on short notice in order to handle them, and then ended up sending them to a facility to help them, of course, get legal representation to process their asylum claims. Orrin Selstrom, litigation director for Lawyers for Civil Rights, told Axios, and this is about the case, that he doesn't know who made or distributed those brochures, but that his organization is among several that have asked for a criminal investigation. Selstrom added that such an action could potentially lead to charges against Ron DeSantis, who has taken responsibility for transporting migrants and promised a lot more. DeSantis, he says, has publicly taken credit for his conduct, so the criminal liability may extend to the highest level, certainly, although, of course, the law on that is a little bit of a gray area. So I don't necessarily know if he's actually going to be held accountable. But now, again, you have this lawsuit, which is a civil lawsuit, and lists the governor as a defendant along with the Florida Department of Transportation and their leader, Jared Perdue. So here are some of the claims from the plaintiffs in the suit. These immigrants who are pursuing the proper channels for lawful immigration status in the United States experienced cruelty akin to what they fled in their home country. Defendants manipulated them, stripped them of their dignity, deprived them of their liberty, bodily autonomy, due process, and equal protection under the law, and impermissibly interfered with the federal government's exclusive control over immigration in furtherance of an unlawful goal and a person's political agenda. The filing also alleges that DeSantis and other defendants engaged in false imprisonment of each migrant and inflicted emotional distress on them. when they became aware that they were transported thousands of miles away from Texas, where they need to continue with their federal immigration proceedings without any of the support from the defendants. Remember, they were promised support, so they could go back and have resources to then pursue their cases to stay in the United States legally. Well, when they found out they didn't have any of that, they became emotionally traumatized, and that's completely understandable. Defendants also negligently inflicted emotional distress upon the individual plaintiffs through their actions described throughout this complaint. This negligent infliction of emotional distress caused the plaintiffs dignitary harms and physical manifestations of harm, requiring mental health counseling and support. So now, of course, DeSantis, his communication director, Taryn Fenske, responded to the report from Axios, saying that, quote, immigrants have been more than willing to leave Bexar County after being abandoned, homeless, and left to fend for themselves. Florida gave them an opportunity to seek greener pastures in a sanctuary jurisdiction that offered greater resources for them, as we expected. Fenske added, unless the MA National Guard has abandoned these individuals, they have been provided accommodations, sustenance, clothing, and more options to succeed following their unfair enticement into the United States. Unlike the 53 immigrants who died in a truck found abandoned in Bexar County this June. I love how they pretend to care about dead immigrants. Look, and you know why that happened? It's mainly because, honestly, it's Congress. Congress does not want to fix our broken immigration system. What we need to do is actually have more judges at the border to process asylum cases. There's a lot of people coming over and claiming asylum. And they're sitting there. And they're facing harsh treatment. Terrible conditions. But look, these people did not sneak over the border. Again, they entered the United States legally as asylum seekers. And look, the worst thing about that is, of course, Abbott, that's Texas Governor Greg Abbott, as well as Ron DeSantis, and those officials, they knew that already. They knew that. By the way, they specifically took the Venezuelans from Texas, brought them to Florida, and then shipped them to Massachusetts. Now, there was also a mixture of migrants from different areas. Again, many of them believed to have been from Venezuela, and some of them happened to be from Cuba. Do you know who Ron DeSantis did not ship out to Massachusetts? The Cubans. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be that, there's a lot of Cuban immigrants that become, when they become citizens, end up voting for Republicans? Could be. I don't know for sure. But what I do believe is that this is absolutely a political stunt. And if it leads to charges, I absolutely think it should, because it seems like human trafficking to me. But again, my cynicism is showing, and I don't necessarily believe that Ron DeSantis will face any sort of consequences. At most, it'll be a staffer. At best, right? And that's, of course, they do find out that it was DeSantis's government on his orders that made these misleading brochures, and that could be hard to prove. Maybe, this lawsuit could lead to discovery, and that might be interesting, because if we find out who made these, and it happened to have been under, the orders of DeSantis or someone who's high up in the DeSantis administration, well, that could branch off into actual criminal charges. Because again, luring people, that's human trafficking, and that is illegal. Now, the other thing, too, is, look, the entire situation is disgusting. Here we have governors using desperate human beings as political pawns, political props. And as I've said before, when it comes to, hatred of immigrants, especially migrants, there's no bottom to that barrel on the Republican side. But also understand that, too, we wouldn't have gotten to this point had immigration not been, had immigration actually been handled and not, punted at any time where, for example, Democrats happen to have been in charge. So, look, we have to get more judges at the border. We have to do something to fix our incredibly slow, broken, and inefficient immigration system, or else stuff like this is going to continue happening. And they're going to, right wingers are going to continue to use these people, these often incredibly desperate people, fleeing terrible circumstances, as political props and pawns in order to try to win elections based on hatred.